And the result is democracy. A free program develops democratically under the control of its users. The users decide what it's going to do. They don't do this through elections. Instead, they do this by participating in changing the program or choosing between the versions. Everybody can participate as much as she wishes in the social decision about what the program will do in the future. Those who are content and don't care very much, they won't participate. They don't have to. They'll just accept what other people do until the day comes when they see something they really can't stand. And then they can participate in deciding to do it a different way. So the sum total of all the decisions that people make is society's decision. If a lot of people want progress in this direction, people will often make changes going in this direction and we'll get faster progress. If only a few people want progress in this direction, then occasionally we'll get changes going in this direction. And if nobody wants changes in this direction, the program won't go in this direction because nobody has the power to force anybody else to accept it. By contrast, a proprietary program develops under the power of its developer and imposes that power on all the users. If the developer wants to put in a malicious feature, he does, because he knows that the users can't take it out. The only thing they could possibly do is escape. And maybe all the competing programs have the same malicious feature and there's no place to escape to. If the developer wants the program to be incompatible, he makes it incompatible, realizing that the users can't change it to be compatible. So where free software brings democracy, proprietary software brings dictatorship. And that is exactly what the free software movement is all about. We want everyone to escape to the free world. Our goal is the liberation of cyberspace and everyone in it. The free world is the new continent that we have built in cyberspace. Because it's a virtual continent, there is room for everyone. And because there were no indigenous peoples in cyberspace, we didn't displace any. It's impossible to live in freedom in the old world of cyberspace, where every program has its feudal lord who bullies the users. Of course, some lords bully the users more and some bully the users less, but the point is there shouldn't be lords over users of software. Users should be free. However, there is a big difference between open source and free software at the level of philosophy. That's where the main difference is. Because the philosophy of free software is this is a social, ethical, and political movement for freedom. Whereas open source, the philosophy of open source was chosen in 1998 as a way to forget about the ethical level. Open source advocates talk about how to develop powerful and reliable software, and that's all they mention as a goal. They don't say that it's an ethical issue. To the open source promoters, they say that proprietary software is likely to be an inferior solution. For the free software movement, proprietary software is the problem, and replacing it with free software is the solution. So it's a completely different philosophy based on different values. Open source cites only practical values of convenience. Open source says that it recommends a development model on the grounds that it's likely to result in more powerful, reliable software. Well, to the extent that's true, I think it's a nice bonus. But freedom and social solidarity are far more important than the convenience of the software.
And what is special about it? It goes against capitalistic economic theory until you look closer. And a lot of the time, I get questions when I talk to business audiences. Business people will ask me, "Are you a communist, Mr. Perens?" And usually I ask the people who are asking me that, "Pardon me, what company do you work for?" And it's always a company that does a great deal of manufacturing in China. And so I say to this person, "Well, I'm sorry, but the nation of China has not given up communism, and they are, of course, the darlings of the United States because they make things less expensively than the United States does." In contrast, open source is a way of helping your neighbor. It is a way of sharing. But no, we are not software communism. We are self-sustaining. We have a 25-year plus history, starting from Richard, going strong of supporting our own activities. But where are the sales? Where are the profits? How does this work without this thing? And it's very customer-centric. It puts the customer first. And how can a company survive if they put the customer first? So these are the questions that we have to answer to understand it. So why do companies go on the stock market? They go on it to distribute cost and risk with the motivation for the people who take that cost and risk of sharing in the reward. So proprietary software developers, before they start to write proprietary software, it's useless, obviously. And they have to make a great deal of money so that they can pay for that development. So many of them will go on the stock market and solicit people to give them that money. And then they'll go away for 5 years and write a piece of software that imprisons you. And at the end of that, they start selling it to you. And only at that time will they make a profit. And then they can start paying back their investors. They also share risk. So if a proprietary software company makes software that no one wants, their company will go out of business. The stock will be worth nothing. Now, there are very many companies that engage in free software that also use the stock market to distribute cost and risk. So I'm not saying that this is a thing of only proprietary software companies. There are also rewards. If the company makes money, the investors are paid back and more. So through the stock market, many investors share the cost and the risk of a company. And this turns out to be a lot like free software, open source in some ways. So what about free software and open source? Its developers are its customers. It distributes the cost and risk of development among many developers because each developer shares a little bit of that development and no one puts in too much. Open source also drives quality up and costs down, and that is because of simple economics. In economic theory, we have something called the invisible hand, and that was invented by a man named Adam Smith. And Adam Smith said that in a competitive market, there is an invisible hand that pushes costs down and quality up, and that is because of competition. Obviously, you will buy from the companies that have the lowest cost and the best quality. Okay, you don't get this to the same extent with proprietary software, because proprietary software works to lock you in and not have a fair market for service where everyone can participate. So, does open source and free software hurt jobs? This is one of the most hurtful criticisms that we face, and I must set it right. First of all, there are public figures that can give you the answer for this. For example, in the United States, there is the Bureau of Labor Statistics that reports on what companies do. And that bureau says that only 30% of programmers work for companies that actually sell software. Where are all the other programmers working for? They are working for companies that use software and develop software for their own use. That is where most programmers are working. So when we talk about job elimination, first of all, in theory, we would only be talking about that particular 30%, but it turns out that isn't even true, because if you think that free software and open source hurt jobs, then you believe that there is a fixed demand for software, that the world only needs so much software per year, and if they could get more, they would not need it. That's not true. The world needs lots more software. Open source is an important means of innovation. It's an innovation in itself. Don't mistake open source vendors for open source. Laws should place open source and proprietary software on a level playing field, considering both their merits, and open source licensing as a merit. And EPLA could be a big step toward killing open source. Don't let it pass.